I'm in due receipt of your letter dated 24th ultimo, and glad to know that you have safely reached the USA. After suffering from seasickness, I thank you for your greetings and blessings. I know by now you must have recovered fully from the sickness and must be keeping good health. I was delighted to read that you have started your activities in the States and have already delivered some lectures. I pray to Lord Balakrishna to give you enough strength to enable you to carry the message of Sri Bhagavatam. I feel that you should stay there until you fully recover from your illness and return only after you have completed your mission. Here everything is normal. With respect, yours sincerely, Srimati Muraji. Prabhupada regarded the last line of this letter as especially significant. His well-wisher was urging him to stay in America until he had completed his mission. He had told the immigration officials in New York that he will be staying in America for 2 months. I have 1 month sponsors in Butler, he thought, and then I have no support. So perhaps I can stay another month. So he had said 2 months. Srimati Morarji, however, was urging him to stay on. He saw that the prospect for preaching to the American were good, but he felt he would need support from India. At any rate, he had spent long enough in Butler, and he now had 1 month left in America. So he decided to go to New York City and try to preach there before his time was up. But first he wanted to visit Philadelphia, where he had arranged a meeting with Sanskrit professor Dr. Norman Brown at the University of Pennsylvania. Mrs. Agarwal was sorry to see him go. So Sally is describing in her own words. After a month, I really loved the Swami. I felt protective in a way, and he wanted to go to Philadelphia. But I couldn't imagine, I told him, I could not imagine him going to Philadelphia for 2 days. He was going to speak there and then to New York. But he knew no one in New York. If the thing didn't pan out in Philadelphia, he was just going to New York. And then there was no one. I just couldn't imagine. It made me sick. I remember the night he was leaving, about 2 in the morning. I remember sitting there as long as he could wait before Gopal took him to Pittsburgh to get on that bus. Gopal got a handful of change, and I remember telling him how to put the money in the slot so that he could take a bath at the bus station. Because he was supposed to take a bath a few times a day. And Gopal told him how to do that and told him about the automats in New York. He told him what he could eat and what he couldn't eat. And he gave him these coins in a sock, and that's all he left us with. Hari Bol. As a sannyasi, Srila Prabhupada was used to picking up and leaving one place for another. As a mendicant preacher, he had no remorse about leaving behind the quiet life of Butler YMCA. And he had no attachment for the domestic habitant, where he would cook and talk with Sally Agarwal about vacuum cleaners, frozen food, and American ways. But why had he gone to Butler? And why was he going to New York? He saw it as Krishna's grace. As a pure devotee of Krishna, he wanted to be an instrument for distributing Krishna consciousness. His stay in Butler had been helpful. He had gotten first-hand experience of American life, and he gained confidence that his health was strong and his message communicable. He was glad to see that America had the necessary ingredient for his Indian vegetarian diet, and that the people could understand his English. He had learned that casual one-time lectures here and there were of limited value, and that although there would be opposition from the established religions, people individually were very much interested in what he had to say. So on October 18th, he left Butler via Philadelphia for New York City. Wonderful. So we will be embarking on chapter number 3, Struggling Alone. Prabhupada writes in his own words, I used to sit in the back and listen to his meetings silently. He was speaking all impersonal nonsense, and I kept my silence. There you go. I was talking to Raghunath Priya Prabhu on Sunday after I gave the Bhagavatam class, and he was saying that some of the saints, they speak so nicely, but at the end they just bring this Mayavad philosophy. But the people in general doesn't have this intelligence to discriminate. And then I was telling Prabhuji that we should feel so fortunate that Prabhupada books explain it so nicely that even if someone swear a little bit, we can be easily able to figure it out. But so many people get misguided. That is the things in Kali Yuga. One of the things is we get misguided. So Prabhupada can understand this. Then one day he asked if I would like to speak, and I spoke about Krishna consciousness. I challenged that he was speaking manufactured philosophy and all nonsense from Shankaracharya. He tried to back out and said he was not speaking. Shankaracharya was speaking. I said, good, you are representing him. That is the same thing, unquote. He then said to me, quote, Swamiji, I like you very much, but you cannot speak here, unquote. But although our philosophies differed and he would not let me speak, he was kind and I was nice to him. Hari Bol. This is the dealings Prabhupada did, great Vaishnavas. Prabhupada knew no one in New York City, but he had a contact, Dr. Ramamurthy Mishra. He had written Dr. Mishra from Butler, enclosing the letter of introduction Paramanand Mehra had given him in Bombay. He had also phoned Dr. Mishra, who welcomed Prabhupada to join him in New York. At the Port Authority bus terminal, a student of Dr. Mishra's met him as he arrived from Philadelphia and escorted him directly to an Indian festival in the city. There, Prabhupada met Dr. Mishra as well as Ravi Shankar and his brother, the dancer Uday Shankar. Prabhupada then accompanied Dr. Mishra to his apartment at 33 Riverside Drive, beside the Hudson River. The apartment was on the 14th floor and had large windows overlooking the river. Dr. Mishra gave Prabhupada a room to himself. Dr. Mishra was a dramatic, shavir personality, given to flashing glances and making expressive gestures with his hands. He regularly used words like lovely and beautiful, presenting an artfully polished image of what a guru should be. He was what some New Yorkers refer to as an uptown Swami. Before coming to America, Dr. Mishra had been a Sanskrit scholar and a guru, as well as a doctor. He'd written a number of books, such as the textbook of yoga philosophy and self-analysis and self-knowledge, a work based on the teaching of the monastic philosopher Shankara. After he came to the United States, he continued with his medical profession, but as he began taking disciples, he gradually dropped his practice. Although a sannyasi, he did not wear the traditional saffron dhoti and kurta, but instead wore tailored Nehru jackets and white slacks. His complexion was dark, whereas Prabhupada was golden, and he had thick black hair. At 44, he was young enough to be Prabhupada's son. Dr. Mishra had been suffering from bad health when Prabhupada came into his life, and Prabhupada's arrival seems the perfect medicine. Ram Murti Mishra explained in his own words, His Holiness Prabhupada Bhaktivedanta Goswamiji really knocked me down with love. He was really an incarnation of love. My body has become a skeleton, and he really brought me back to life. His cooking, and especially his love and his devotion to Lord Krishna. I was very lazy in the matter of cooking, but he would get up and have ready. Dr. Mishra appreciated that Prabhupada, cooking with the precision of a chemist, would prepare many dishes, and that he had a gusto for eating. Ramamurti Mishra explained in his own words as follows, It was not bread he gave me prasadam. This was life, and he saved my life. At that time, I was not sure I would live, but his habit to eat on time, whether I was hungry or not, that I very much liked. He had get up and say, all right, this is Bhagavad Prasadam, and I would say, all right. John Subal, an old student of Dr. Mishra's, often saw Srila Prabhupada and her teacher together at the Riverside Drive apartment. So Joan Subal writes in his own word, I have a memory of Swamiji as a child, in the sense of his being very innocent, a very simple person, very pure. The impression I have from Dr. Mishra is that he regarded Swamiji as a father figure who was kindly and good. But basically the words most often used referring to Swamiji were like a child, meaning that he was simple in a classical, beautiful sense. Dr. Mishra mentions to me, when I was first introduced to Swamiji, that he was a very holy man, very religious, wrapped in God consciousness. Swamiji was very sweet. I myself remember him as a very, very good man, even in the practical details of living in New York, which seems to involve him very much. Because he was a practical man and was looking for the best place to begin his work. I remember very well that he was always careful about washing his clothes out every single night, also reminding you, wash your japa bag and iron it. Haribol. I would come in and find a group of students in the living area of Dr. Mishra's apartment. And in the bathroom would he hung Swamiji's orange robes. Srila Prabhupada would sometimes discuss with Dr. Mishra the aim of his visit to America, expressing his spiritual master vision of establishing Krishna consciousness in the West. He requested Dr. Mishra to help him, but Dr. Mishra would always refer to his own teaching work, which kept him very busy, and to his plan for leaving the country soon. After a few weeks, when it became inconvenient to maintain Prabhupada at the apartment, Dr. Mishra shifted him to his Hatha Yoga studio on the 5th floor of 100 West 72nd Street near Central Park. The large studio was located in the center of the building and included an office and an adjoining private room where Prabhupada stayed. It had no windows. Philosophically at complete odds with Prabhupada, Dr. Mishra accepted the absolute truth in the impersonal future for Brahman to be supreme. Prabhupada stressed the supremacy of the personal future or Bhagwan, following the Vedic theistic philosophy that the most complete understanding of the absolute truth is personal. The Bhagavad Gita says that the impersonal Brahman is subordinated to Bhagwan and is an emanation from him, just as the sunshine is an emanation from the sun planet. You know, I came across while I was preparing for my Sunday Bhagavatam class, that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given this point using the Vedanta Sutra to defeat the Mayavadis. So nice, 2 pages. I think everyone should remember those points. It will help us. This conclusion had been taught by the leading traditional acharyas of ancient India, such as Ramanuja and Madhava, and Srila Prabhupada was in disciplic succession from Madhava. Dr. Mishra, on the other hand, followed Shankara, who taught that the impersonal presence of the absolute truth is all in all, and that the personality Godhead is ultimately an illusion. Whereas Prabhupada's theistic philosophy accepted the individual spiritual self, Atma, as an eternal servant of the supreme spiritual being, Bhagwan. Dr. Mishra's view accepted the spiritual self as not an individual. Rather, his idea was that since each person is identical with God, the Supreme Brahman, there is no need to worship God outside oneself. As Dr. Mishra would put it, everything is one. Hari. Prabhupada challenge. Prabhupada is so bold. If each of us is actually the Supreme, then why is this Supreme suffering and struggling in the material world? Dr. Mishra would counter that the Supreme is only temporarily covered by illusion and that through Hatha Yoga and meditation, one would become enlightened, understanding it is all the Supreme. Prabhupada would again challenge, but if the Supreme could be covered by illusion, then illusion would be greater than God, greater than the Supreme. Prabhupada considered Dr. Mishra's Mayavadi because of his inadvertent acceptance that Maya illusion is greater than the absolute truth. For Srila Prabhupada, not only was the impersonal philosophy unpalatable, it was an insult to the personality of Godhead. And according to Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita 7:24 and 9:11, unintelligent man who knows me not think that I have assumed this form and personality. Due to their small knowledge, they do not know my higher nature, which is changeless and supreme. Fools deride me when I appear in this human form. They do not know my transcendental nature and my supreme dominion over all that be. Lord Chaitanya had also strongly refuted the Mayavad philosophy. Everything about the Supreme Personality Godhead is spiritual, including his body, opulence, and paraphernalia. Mayavad philosophy, however, covers his spiritual opulence and advocates the theory of impersonalism. Before coming to America, Srila Prabhupada had written in his Bhagavatam purport, quote, "The ambitious Mayavadi philosophers desire to merge into the existence of the God. This form of mukti, liberation, means denying one's individual existence. In other words, it is a kind of spiritual suicide. It is absolutely opposed to the philosophy of Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga offers immortality to the individual conditioned soul. If one follows the Mayavad philosophy, he misses his opportunity to become immortal after giving up the material body. In the words of Lord Chaitanya, Mayavadi Krishna Aparadhi, Mayavadi impersonalists are great offender unto Lord Krishna. Thus, Lord Chaitanya had concluded that if one even hear the commentary of Sankara, one's entire spiritual life is spoiled. Dr. Mishra was content to align himself with the philosophy of Sankara and allow Prabhupada to stay with Lord Krishna and the Bhagavad Gita. But Srila Prabhupada point out that even Sankara accepted that the personality of Godhead Krishna or Narayan exists eternally beyond the material world. Therefore, he is transcendental person, Narayana Parovyakta. A mendicant Prabhupada was temporarily dependent on the goodwill of his Mayavadi acquaintance, with whom he regularly ate and conversed, and from whom he accepted shelter. But what a great inconvenience it was. He had come to America to speak purely and boldly about Krishna, but he was being restricted. In Butler, he had been confined by his host middle-class sensibilities. Now he was silent in a different way. He was treated with kindness, but he was considered a threat. Dr. Mishra could not allow his student to hear the exclusive praise of Lord Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. How envious they are. Spending most of his time in his new room, Srila Prabhupada kept at his typing and translating. But when Dr. Mishra held his yoga classes, Prabhupada would sometimes come out and lead a kirtan or lecture. So Robert Nelson, one of Prabhupada's first young sympathizers in New York, I went to Dr. Mishra's service and Dr. Mishra talked. Swamiji was sitting on a bench and then all of a sudden Dr. Mishra stopped the service and he gets a big smile and say, Swamiji will sing us a song. I think Dr. Mishra wouldn't let him speak. Somebody told me Dr. Mishra didn't want him to preach. Every morning, several hours before dawn, Prabhupada would rise, take his bath, chant Hare Krishna on his beds, and work at his translating, while outside his closed-in, windowless chamber, dawn came and the city awoke. He had no stove, so daily he had to walk the 7 blocks to Riverside Drive apartment to cook. He would be late morning when he would come out onto the busy street. He would walk north on Columbus Avenue amid the steady flow of pedestrians, pausing at each intersection in the sweeping breeze from the river. Instead of small town scenery of Butler, he passed through the rows of 30-story office building on Columbus Avenue. At street level were shoe repair shop, candy store, laundries, and continental restaurants. The upper stories held the professional suite for doctors, dentists, and lawyers. At 75th Street, he would turn west and walk through a neighborhood of brownstone apartment and then across Amsterdam to Broadway with its Center Island Park. The greenery here could more accurately be described as blackery, since it was covered with soot and city grime. Broadway displayed its produce shops and butcher shops with their stand extended onto the sidewalk. An old man sat on benches in the thin stripe of park between the northbound and southbound traffic. The last block on 75th before Riverside Drive held high-rise apartment building with doormen standing. 33 Riverside Drive also had a doorman. Sometimes Prabhupada would walk in Riverside Park, still careful for the condition of his heart. He liked the long stretches of flat walking area. Sometimes he would walk from Dr. Mishra's studio down 72nd Street to Amsterdam Avenue to the West End Super 8, where he would buy produce and spices for his cooking. Sometimes he would wander through Manhattan without any fixed direction, and sometimes he would take buses to different areas of the cities. Haribol. On the weekend, Prabhupada would accompany Dr. Mishra to his Anand Ashram, 1 hour north of the city in Monroe, New York. Joan Sual, who used to drive them, would overhear that animated conversation in the backseat of her car. Although they spoke in Hindi, she could hear their discussion turn into loud, shouting arguments. And afterward, they would again become friends. At Anand Ashram, Prabhupada would usually hold kirtan with Dr. Mishra's students joining him in the chanting and even in dancing. Dr. Mishra was particularly fond of Prabhupada's chanting. Haribol. Ramamurthy Mishra explained in his own words. Haribol. Yeah, we can read some more. I have never seen or met any devotee who sang so much. And his kirtan was just ambrosial. If you pay attention and become relaxed, that voice has very electrical vibration on your heart. You cannot avoid it. 99% of the students, whether they liked it or not, got up and danced and chanted. And I felt very blessed to meet such a great soul. Harvey Cohen, a visitor to Anand Ashram, explained as follows. Everyone got up early and went to morning meditation. Dr. Mishra was dressed in a golden Indian style jacket, and his students were already deeply into it when I entered the room. All the cushions were taken, so I picked a spot in the back of the room where I could lean against the wall to facilitate my meditation. Seated at one side was an older Indian man in saffron coat and wrapped in a pinkish wool blanket. He seems to be muttering to himself, and I later discovered that he was praying. It was Swami Bhaktivedanta. His forehead was painted with a white V-shaped sign, and his eyes were half shut. He seems very serene. He seemed very serene. Harvey tried, but he couldn't do the Raja Yoga. He was new to Anand Ashram and had only come up for a weekend retreat. During his morning meditation, he found himself more attracted to the green mist above the lake outside the window than to the circle on the wall he was supposed to be meditating on. So Harvey is gonna explain in his own word the ambience that he received at that time. So we should stop here and be punctual on our activities. Thank you very much for joining. Beautiful morning to utter the holy name and then listen the Vaishnava song, read Prabhupada life. What a glorious morning we can have. So thank you very much, all of you. I would like to offer my humble obeisances at the desk of these wonderful Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis. Vancha kalpatarubhasya kipashendu bhayevacha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Thank you very much. Have a blessed day. If anybody has any question, comment, corrections, please do so. Otherwise, we will end our session. Hari Bol.